Hey, welcome back. I have a theory about conservative institutions. Think about the institutions in the world that are right-wing, whether it's the NFL or a police force or the military or NASCAR. What are the most masculine things? The Boy Scouts might be an example of that. Well, these either must be destroyed by the woke left or, better yet, colonized. And if you colonize, let's say, a police force, you do two things. For example, let's say you bring in a vaccine mandate and you demand that every cop take it. Well, two things are going to happen. First of all, you're going to purge and push out people who are sort of don't tread on me, conservatives and libertarians, people who are more skeptical. You're going to purge a lot of true conservatives, and you're going to entryist a bunch of underminers. Look at the take a knee move in the NFL, which has destroyed a lot of political support and public support for the NFL. I put it to you that that is Justin Trudeau's plan for the Canadian Armed Forces. I see in the news that recruitment is down 19%, and I see most coverage says this is a terrible thing, this is not going well. And I thought, no, are you kidding? This is exactly what Justin Trudeau and his advisors wanted to happen. Do you think that tampon dispenser, which Trudeau ordered be put in military bases, men's rooms, do you think that was just a gimmick, or do you think it was a flag to push away traditional military recruits to lead the way for who knows well? Well, joining us now is a man with his own opinion on the subject. I'll ask him what he thinks of my thesis. Lorne Gunter is a senior columnist at the Edmonton Sun and other post-media newspapers, and his latest is called Canadian Military in Shambles, Thanks to Liberals' Underfunding and Woke Policies. Lorne, great to see you again.
Good to see you.
Now, there's a saying, never ascribe to malice what could be explained by stupidity. And yes. I hear that a lot in politics,
yes.
Which is don't cook up a conspiracy theory. The simplest answer is probably the right one. That's called Occam's razor.
Occam's razor. Yeah.
And this is just, unintended consequences and bad side effects. That's the happy version. I say, no, I bet this was deliberate. What do you think?
I don't give them that much credit for that kind of intelligence. They can't sit down and plot this out because they're not that smart. Not because they don't have all of those values and goals that you ascribe to them, but just because, this is a government that late last year was still taking 6 months to get new passports out. Yeah. They are just incompetent, period. They're dense. They haven't a clue. I used to say when I worked on Parliament Hill in the 80s that there were people who didn't know how to organize flatulence at a bean dinner. And these are those people. So no, are there some people in their advisors circle? There was a minister's advisory committee that came out 2 years ago with a plan for getting rid of systemic racism, colonialism, settlerism, white supremacy in the Canadian Armed Forces. Are there some of them who are maybe smart enough to have figured out how to do that? Yes, possibly. But anybody in this government, they just don't have the brain power to come up with something like that. But they are woke enough and fashionable enough that they would buy into all of this stuff on a very superficial basis and do the same amount of damage.
By the way, it's happening in other militaries too, probably not to the same degree. The UK has basically announced we don't want stale, pale males, is one of the phrases. In the United States, they're really emphasizing transgender recruitment. But both the British and the American military are so much larger to start with that the erosion of these woke policies, it's happening, but they're starting from a larger pile. In Canada, we were already depleted.
Yeah. And the other advantage that the Americans and the Brits have over us is that they properly fund or close to properly fund their military, and they give them real tasks, real missions to do. We don't give anybody in our military real missions anymore. You remember when Trudeau came in 2015, on the night that he won, he said he was announcing to the world that Canada was back. And part of that meant on the international stage that we were going to do more peacekeeping. Well, we have done vastly less peacekeeping than the Harper government did. We have done one 6-month peacekeeping tour since 2015, and that was in
Mali because his mom went on vacation there, right?
Exactly. And when the UN asked us to extend our mission there, because of course the people we send are really good and they do very good jobs with very little equipment, old equipment, bad equipment in lots of cases, but they're so well trained and they're so intelligent that they do a good job. And when the UN asked us to stay an extra 6 months, we said, no, we're not going to do that. So even when the UN asks, these guys can't do peacekeeping. And of course, they won't do hot war. And the thing that really got me is about a year ago, there was that gigantic earthquake in Turkey and Syria that killed tens of thousands of people. We have two absolutely first-class military hospitals that also deal with, they have bulldozers so they can open roads. And they're called DARTs. And they are really, really good. We didn't even send those. Like, it just absolutely baffles me. So maybe you're right. Maybe there are people deep down in the bowels at the Department of National Defense who are thinking up ways of undermining the military. But I just think that it's this woke party that they're having in Ottawa under Trudeau, and it's really killing our military. You know, we were told at the last NATO meeting, which followed NATO exercises where we couldn't participate because we don't have enough people or equipment.
Right.
We were told at the last NATO summit that we had better live up to our commitments to go from 1.2% of our GDP on military to closer to 2%. Even Harper made that commitment and never lived up to it. Harper got to about 1.5%. And the Liberals have now scaled back down to about 1.2%. But we have the lowest percentage of our GDP devoted to the military of any country in NATO. And we just expect that the Americans would defend us if anybody attacked. The Americans will put us in their planes and fly us wherever we need to go if we want to go somewhere. So at the last NATO summit, we were told, in no uncertain terms, I mean, NATO is a bureaucratic, diplomatic organization. They don't say blunt things, that they're not tough talkers, but almost as tough as NATO's ever been. They said, look, you have got to start spending on your military. And Trudeau budget comes out after that and they just ignore it. We're not going to spend any extra money on that. We're going to spend a lot. We're going to spend $200 billion on infrastructure for green programs that aren't reducing emissions at all. We'll give you $8,000 to go out and buy an EV that won't run for you in January and February in much of the country, but we're not going to spend on the military. Their priorities are so screwy that it's really head shaking. It's hard to believe that these are grown-ups who are in charge of a sovereign nation. You know, for years now, since Trudeau's dad was the prime minister back in the 70s, they've been nationalists. Oh, Canada, we are so proud of Canada. Canada is a nation unlike any other in the world, and we are a leader in the world, and we punch above our weight. You've heard them use that term so many times. Well, one of the things that small countries which have sovereignty aspirations do is they properly fund their military. I mean, the Swedes, they're about to join NATO, I think, but they have been neutral now for 70 years. And they realize that part of that is to maintain their neutrality, they have to have a properly funded armed forces. So they built their own jets. They have their own submarines. They have armored vehicles that are modern and new. We don't do that. And yet they keep boasting about how wonderful Canadian sovereignty is. Well, you can't defend your sovereignty. You don't have sovereignty.